Please welcome Michael LaFell, member JINSA Board of Directors, to introduce this evening's third Henry M. Scoop Jackson Distinguished Service Award.
So it's a pleasure to be here tonight, obviously. Congressman Eliot Engel represents New York's 16th District. As a top Democrat on the panel, Congressman Engel is the ranking member on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he serves along with Chairman Ed Royce. He also serves on the powerful Energy and Commerce Committee, including as a senior member of both the Subcommittee on Health and the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology. While those may be his official titles, if you ask almost anyone who has been active in pro-Israel circles over the past few decades, they would primarily identify Congressman Engel as one of the strongest and most fearless champions of the U.S.-Israel relationship, and for that we thank you. In recent years, Representative Engel helped champion the so-called Missile Defense Plus Ups, which is supplementary money that the U.S. gives Israel separate from the annual $3 billion military aid package, funds which Israel has used to create Iron Dome, David's Sling, the Arrow system, and more. All of these programs were joint projects with U.S. defense contractors and have helped dramatically improve our own missile defense capabilities in the United States. Behind closed doors, Congressman Engel has worked tirelessly to build bridges between political and military leaders in the United States and Israel. But it is precisely because of his desire to do good far exceeds his desire for political gain that JINSA is so excited to honor Eliot Engel tonight. And no introduction of Representative Engel would be complete without mentioning that he is the very proud husband of Patricia Engel, who goes by Pat, and they are the proud parents of 3 children, Julia, Philip, and Jonathan. Because of his long and storied career as a champion of both U.S. national security and the U.S.-Israel military security relationship that is critical for our security, it is my distinct pleasure to announce Eliot Engel to receive the Scoop Jackson Distinguished Service Award.
Well, thank you all very much. You know, when someone gives me a wonderful introduction like that, I wish that 2 of the women in my life could have been here to hear it. My wife and my late mother. I want you to know that my wonderful late mother would have believed every wonderful thing you said about me, and my wife would have wondered who the heck you were talking about. I'm grateful to JINSA for hosting this event tonight, and to all of you who have joined us. I have absolutely very familiar with this organization. It's an organization I respect. It's a principled organization. I've spoken at dinners and panels, and this is really just quite an honor. I also want to acknowledge the reason we're here tonight, which is to honor our United States service members who have dedicated their lives to defending America's national security. You help keep our country and our fellow citizens safe, and for all that, we are deeply grateful. Thank you. I was always an admirer of Scoop Jackson. Scoop Jackson was socially progressive and cared a lot about national security, 2 of the things that I think when I think of myself. Scoop Jackson was someone who understood that the United States and Israel share a special bond, and also understood that we're a leader in the world and we have to act like it. So I had tremendous respect for him, and to get an award that's named after him is really, really very humbling. I want to acknowledge my fellow honorees, Chairman Michael McCaul, whom I consider an important partner with me in Congress. Together, we're launching the Congressional Argentina Caucus. We're branching out. We've worked closely on U.S.-Mexico issues, and I greatly value our partnership. He's a great member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, so I thank you for honoring him as well. And I'm honored to be here tonight with Senator Gerber, a fierce advocate you just heard for the U.S.-Israel relationship. His work on behalf of the Taylor Force Act has been of great help in getting Congress to recognize how Palestinian leadership has perversely incentivized terrorism. And that's really very, very important. JINSA plays an important role in advancing our national security measures. Members of Congress have found JINSA to be an important resource as we weigh the challenges and opportunities of some of our most critical decisions. Like Iran. Now, you may know, as someone said before, I oppose the Iran nuclear agreement. I reached this conclusion after dozens of hearings I attended, classified briefings, as a senior Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. After hundreds of hours of briefings that included classified materials, and after taking a close look at the negotiations and how the United States and its 5 negotiating partners approached the most challenging issues. I want to tell you, on the Foreign Affairs Committee, we call ourselves the most bipartisan committee in the Congress. Under the leadership of Chairman Ed Royce, who is here, I don't know if he's still here, but he's a great friend to me and a great chairman to our committee. And I had the honor of being here a few years ago when he got this prestigious award. It's been really an honor working with him. You know, my very first briefing on the negotiations for the Iran deal was something like this. They told us basically what was happening. The negotiations had started. They were talking with Iran. And I raised my hand and I asked a question the very first time. I said, is Iran stopping enriching uranium, stopping spinning centrifuges while we're negotiating? And I was told no. And I said, no, well, why not? And they said, well, we raised it and Iran wouldn't do it. And I said, well, if Iran wouldn't do it, what does that tell you about their intentions? And what does that tell you about what kind of finished product we're going to come up at the end of these negotiations? From that moment on, I knew that this Iran deal was not going to work, and I knew that it wouldn't be a good deal. And there were many, many reasons to oppose the deal, but I'll just cite 2. One was the fact that if indeed the deal prevented Iran from having a nuclear weapon, then it might have been worth to do whatever we could do. But when you read the agreement carefully, you realize that it doesn't prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. It only postpones it for 15 years. Now, I'm glad it's postponed for 15 years, but what it means is in the year 2030, which is only 13 years, soon to be 12 years away, Iran will be a nuclear threshold state and will be free to do whatever it wants in terms of getting nuclear weapons. That seems like a dumb thing to me. I don't think you have to be a Rhodes Scholar to understand that that's not a good thing. And the second thing is this. Iran came to the negotiating table because Iran was hurting financially. The boycott, the fact that we passed legislation, and by the way, a number of legislative pieces were passed out of our Foreign Affairs Committee. There was one in particular in the summer of 2013, which the Senate did not take up. And Ed Royce and I talked to everyone on our committee. We passed it unanimously. Every Democrat, every Republican on the committee, people from the far left to the far right, because we understand in our committee that the partnership between the U.S. and Israel is very, very important. And so Iran came to the table because it had no money. The sanctions were hurting Iran. And this, of course, released millions and billions of dollars to Iran. And I thought, gee, when Iran had no money over these past few years, they still had enough money to become the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. Imagine what they could do if they get a windfall from all of this. And so, of course, Iran has now reaped it because it's come up front. But next time there's a war, or next time we see attacks of terrorists, I don't want to know that we paid for it by giving Iran a free pass. So I think it's very, very important that Iran's feet are held to the fire. Now, I've taken the position that now the deal is in place, it must be vigorously enforced. International inspectors must have access to all the sites necessary to ensure that Iran is not able to advance its nuclear weapons program covertly or overtly. They've kept us off military functions. That probably shows me they have something to hide. And while we ensure that Iran is living up to what it promised in the agreement, we must also push back on Iran's other dangerous activities. With Iran, we're talking about the most destabilizing force in the Middle East. Iran is the world's most prolific, as I said, state sponsor of terrorism, with its Islamic Revolutionary Guards, its Quds Force, and Hezbollah, spreading instability throughout the region. It's a serial abuser of human rights, a lifeline for the murderous Assad regime in Syria, and of course illicitly developing ballistic missiles and going against many United Nations security resolutions. Since the implementation of the JCPOA, I helped pass legislation to make Iran pay a price for this ugly list of behaviors. There have been so many Royce Engel letters and Royce Engel bills coming out because we show the Congress that the way to do it is a bipartisan way, that partisanship needs to stop at the water's edge. That's the only thing that Iran or other countries like Iran will understand. Just last week, the House passed a bill to crack down even more on Iran's ballistic missile program, as well as measures going after Hezbollah's financing, its use of human shields, and encouraging the European Union to designate the group as a terrorist organization in its entirety. You know, some of our friends in Europe say, well, the military wing of Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, but the social service wing does wonderful things for the people. Well, it doesn't work that way. If you're a terrorist, you're a terrorist, and no one should be dealing with you. We should be trying to get rid of you. Now, there are areas that fall outside the scope of the nuclear deal. As I said, terrorism, ballistic missiles, and other things that Iran does. And it's important to note that Democrats and Republicans have sent a clear, unified message to Tehran. The United States will not stand idly by while Iran's leaders flout international law and abuse human rights. And you know, on one of my recent trips to Israel, I had a discussion with Bibi Netanyahu, and he's very concerned, and rightfully so, about the Syrian ceasefire, which leaves essentially Iran right at Israel's border. He said to me, that's not going to be tolerated, and it shouldn't be tolerated. We have to remember that Iran is a terrorist group, acts like a terrorist group. Its government acts like a terrorist group, and we need to keep it in check. So we cannot have Iranians near Israel's border. We cannot allow Iran to start building bombs in Lebanon so they don't have to cart them down. When I go to Israel, people don't say if there's another Lebanese war. They say when the next Lebanese war comes. So this is what we have to do. And we have to continue to rally members of Congress, and we're doing a good job in doing that, to make sure Israel has all its needs, to condemning the Palestinians for using its people as human shields, making sure that David sling and other things that protect Israel, giving an unprecedented amount of money towards the end of the Obama administration, $830 billion. It's just something that's done because we fight, in a bipartisan way to make sure that Israel and the United States continue its strong alliance. Iran must face consequences for its activities that violate United Nations Security Council 2231 that governs this deal. The resolution established a time-limited ban on Iran's ballistic missile programs and conventional arms transfers, yet Iran continues to ship weapons and fighters to Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Lebanon, and beyond. It's unacceptable, and our partners should join us in saying so. We must also work with our allies to enhance our intelligence capabilities so we can interdict procurement and sales for these illicit programs. And finally, the United States must work with our allies to build support for pushing back the sunset of the JCPOA's most important restrictions. At the end of the agreement, as I said, Iran would be a nuclear threshold state with a short breakout period. I think we all agree when I say this is simply unacceptable. Now, the President's decision last month not to recertify Iran's compliance with the JCPOA is a gamble to some extent, and we have to be careful. We don't want to alienate the British, the Germans, the French that work with us. We don't want to try to induce North Korea to sign an agreement if they think that the United States goes into an agreement and then pulls out. So we have to be very, very careful in how we do it. But one thing we all want to ensure, and that is that Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. Not now, not ever. We have to ensure that our national security remains secure and that the safety and security of Israel is guaranteed. So we need a smart strategy that builds an agenda with our partners, one that promotes American leadership and supports international stability. And so, as my friend Ed Royce would say, enforce the hell out of this thing, push back on Iran's behavior outside the agreement, and continue building international support to ensure Iran never gets a nuclear bomb, even when this agreement expires. Thank you again for JINSA, and thank you for this honor. It's really a tremendous honor for me. Thank you.